I'm Les Youngbar. I was the Chief of Police in Lake Oswego, and I was President of the Association the year 99-2000.
My name is Mike Cahill, and I was President of the Oregon Association Chiefs of Police from 1998 to 1999. And I was the Chief of Police in Eregan, Oregon, Junction City while I was President of the Association, and in Vernonia, Oregon.
My name is Rick Lewis. I served as police chief in 3 different Oregon cities over the course of 28.5 years. I served first in Union, which is Union County in Eastern Oregon, for two years. Then I served 12 years as a police chief in Bandon on the South Coast, and then 14 years as chief in Silverton. And I was president of OACP in 1991.
Hi, I'm Ken Johnson. I was president of the OACP from April of 2012 till April 2013, and I was the police chief for the Fairview Police Department.
I'm Kent Barker. I was the chief of police for the city of Tualatin. I was the president of the association 2008-2009.
Hi, my name is Jim Souls, and I was chief of police for 23 years in Prineville, and all total the chief of police for, 26 or 7 years. I was president of the Oregon Association in 1997 and 1998.
I'm Mike Holden. I was Lincoln City Police Chief from 1976 until 1998. President of the Association from 1984 to 1985.
I was doing a little back research on what was happening in the world because I remembered it. It seemed like a very unsettled time. And then I thought, well, it probably always seems that way in modern history. But in reality, in those years, 99-2000, we were facing the Y2K thing. And I can remember in our city and probably everywhere else, the big topic of discussion was what kind of research are we going to do? What do we need to do to back our systems up? Is everything going to collapse?
So out of that, a lot of planning, strategic thinking, planning went on in every imaginable organization, whether you were a business or a government. You were involved in trying to find ways to minimize whatever the impact might be that nobody knew what it would be to your particular entity.
It was an interesting time, 2012, 2013. If you'll remember, the economy was in a spiral. Oregon, by that time, was really getting hit hard. A lot of cuts in the state budgets, specifically DPSST, and the OSP.
Well, as far as what was happening in the world or the nation at that time, I just remember it was election year. That was the year that Barack Obama was elected as President of the United States, and it was a big change because the big motto or statement that he used a lot was hope and change. And there was a little bit of fear in our association because we didn't know what that hope and change was going to be. But it was his first year, the year that I just happened to be president, and so as we went through that first year, we started to see how the national administration felt about law enforcement.
I'd really like to talk about what was happening nationally during that time period. O.J. Simpson trial was going on for the murder of his former wife.
The interesting year was 1984 because if you remember, the Bhagwan Rajneesh came into Oregon with his followers, and the Rajneesh police were allowed into the association. I was one of 3 people who cast a dissenting vote on that because I did not believe they were actually a legal police department. And of course, also in 1984 is when they introduced a poison, salmonella, into the food in the Dalles to sicken several hundred people. And that ultimately led to the conviction of 2, I believe.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to remember what was going on at that time when, in 1991, when I was first vice president. The president at that time was Tom McCann, and Tom got called up for Desert Storm. And so he was in the Navy Reserve at that time, and he was called up to active duty. And so I ended up being president for 3 months of his term while he was called up.
One of the other important changes that was implemented during that April 12, April 13 time frame was changing the bylaws to reflect a change in how we elect people into the chairs, into the elected officers of the association. Whereas before it was a small group of individuals on a committee, past presidents actually, that made the decision who would be placed into nomination for chairs. We changed the bylaws to allow that individuals would make a presentation, a speech if you will, 5 minutes, to sell themselves and to sell the members of the association on why they would be best suited to step into the Secretary Treasurer's position, because ultimately, as we all know, you're looking at the next as a future president. You elect your president when you put them in the nomination for Secretary Treasurer.
The association was really becoming more involved, I think, and a stronger involvement than ever before in the legislative process.
We didn't have a legislative presence, and so we were pretty much more of a fraternal organization, and just we did the regular training. We had an education and training committee at the time, but we focused pretty much on training, and we had the first day of the conference was always firearms and golf. So it was more a social gathering than and training, those two together. So.
What I found the association became very good at doing was working with our partners, state police and the Oregon Sheriff's Association, and to a lesser degree the Oregon Peace Officers Association.
The association at that time was starting to meld from just a conference with guys getting together more into the education and actually becoming much more professional. You can't just go to a conference for a few days and sit around and talk to guys and with really no educational component. So we decided, that we needed to add that component. That should be a real strong component in the entire conference.
I think within the association, some of the things that were being talked about a lot was the Accreditation Alliance. There were some changes being made there. We had an executive leader who was working on that, and I believe it was called something else, and then we moved in the direction of the Oregon Accreditation Alliance to make sure that we had chiefs and sheriffs and telecommunicators represented in that, because those were the three professions that were being taken care of through the Accreditation Alliance.
Well, during the year I served as president, we implemented some initiatives, and I thought I was a collaborative person, but I think I grew in patience and understanding and the ability to collaborate. As a chief, you have to learn to step back and let other people do things and sometimes make mistakes, and so I hope I grew in that. But I think I also grew emotionally, because during my presidency, the adoption of our granddaughter was finalized through a series of events, and my dad passed away. And that all happened in that short 12-month period of time. So I grew a lot, and I think in a very positive way.
Well, as far as my growth in leadership skills, talk to people around me that say, well, he didn't grow in leadership. The guy wasn't a leader, but I think what helped me the most during my presidency was becoming a better listener, because the state of Oregon is a pretty big state. And when you talk to people as far south as Ashland or Medford or Klamath Falls, or you talk to the guys in Astoria or Seaside or clear out there at Ontario or Baker and LeGrand, it's like we all had a lot of things in common, but there was also a lot of things that was different for us just because of where our agencies were located and the type of resources we had.
My growth during that time, I think, was fairly extensive. When you're chief of police of a small town in Central Oregon, which is on the other side of the mountain from association headquarters and the legislature, Salem, which is a huge part of what goes on for the presidency, is based in and around Salem. And so that presented a lot of challenges. Plus my agency was growing during that time. Our city was growing, and so was the agency. And so balancing that, you know, you had to make sure that you were taking care of things at home, as well as meeting the needs of the association. It was a challenge. I had to grow. And I had to work really, really hard. But it was worth every minute of it. I really enjoyed it, and I got huge personal satisfaction out of that time period.
Well, it's pretty easy to grow as any leadership role when you're president. You get to interact with the small departments, medium, large. You be around the state. You find out that your problems are not by themselves. Others have already had it or are experiencing it. So a president can be as involved as they want to around the state. I chose to be as involved as I possibly could because it seemed like I was always having some surprise coming up, and I knew that some of the other guys are probably facing the same thing. So it just helps you grow as a chief, seeing and interacting with other chiefs in the state and their command staff. It gets you out of your comfort zone and puts you into the big bad world out there, and that's probably the best thing I think that can happen to a president and to a chief is to get out and meet with the other people. I mean, you can pick up the phone and call almost anyone in the Chiefs Association to get an answer. We became that professional. It's just like a doctor calling another doctor for professional advice. And we're now at that level where you can do that with a great deal of comfort, and that makes it worthwhile.
I think probably having to be in front of a city council, that's a pretty big step for a person when you go from being a police officer to a police chief. Now the whole council's looking at you to make the right call for your police department. Whether you're a one-horse town like I was or not, it's your budget, your community you're protecting. It's 2,000 residents, and you're their chief, and you need to take care of them.
Well, I think, and I can't just limit it to the as president. I know that says that, but the truth is it starts when you get in the chairs. And maybe for that matter, I would say in my case, it started actually when I just became involved in the association. I got very involved in on the lobbying group. I guess bottom line, if you look at all these various assignments and some other ones that I had and got to participate in, is that the growth comes from the fact that, besides just, I guess, the sort of knowledge, is if you don't begin to understand this, then there's something wrong, that there are all these different interest groups out there. Right? So anytime, we'd sit in an association meeting and say, we ought to change this, and why can't we? Why doesn't this happen? Whatever that might be in the law, you begin to realize, well, yeah, but then that might affect the sheriffs or the folks in the criminal justice system or the folks at the youth authority or restaurant owners, and you begin to realize that it's important when you're working on anything that's of any sort of state level magnitude or even local for that matter, that you get enough input, the right contingency of people to really get a solution that's going to work for as best as it can for everybody. It's not going to work for everybody. There's always give and take, but that you need to be ready to give and take. That's the bottom line.
At that time, when I first joined the association, that was in 1984, when I became police chief in Union. And I relied very heavily on one particular individual as a mentor, and it was Jim Jones. Jim was the chief in Ontario at the time, and he was instrumental in getting me involved in the association, and within just a year or two, I think, after I joined the association, I was the district representative for that district over there, and Jim's mentoring and his helping me with to develop leadership skills. I mean, being in Eastern Oregon and so far away from training, you either relied on a mentor to provide that assistance, or you did a lot of reading and learning about organizational skills and leadership on your own. And so we relied very heavily, I did at least, on the training that OACP provided at that time, because that's pretty much the only training that we saw on the east side of the state.
I would really encourage new chiefs to understand the concept that they're not the first chief, and they're not the first one to face the problems and the issues that are coming down. I would encourage chiefs to look around the state and find those chiefs that are the most successful and get to know them and pick their brains, get their knowledge, get their help. They'll help you. They want to help you.
What I would say to new chiefs is these are very challenging times, but this is still an honorable profession.
This profession can take its toll. It really can. And I can recall the time when the job was so important that I put it above family, and you cannot do that. I'm very fortunate that I still have a family, because I devoted so many hours and so much of the family time to the job.
It's a great profession, and I would just encourage all chiefs to just remember that law enforcement profession, our reputation is based on how chiefs do things and how they run their departments, and so to make sure that they're doing things with good ethics and good morals and treating employees correctly.
Law and police work has always been one of the top, most respected professions in this country, certainly on the West Coast. We have a high standard for law enforcement on the West Coast, and our new police chiefs are the glue that will hold that together.